Kaito Takagi, the guy who's been stuck at the absolute bottom of the dungeon world for years because he's been shooting his bug spray guns at slimes, the kind of enemies you kill in your first 5 minutes of any game. But somehow, Kaito's still struggling, living in permanent newbie mode. Kaito's got dreams of not being the laughingstock of the dungeon community. His big inspiration? Captain Katsuragi, a legendary explorer and the dad of Kaito's childhood crush, because chasing after the glory of your crush's dad is definitely not weird at all. Well, of course, by sheer dumb luck, he stumbles upon a rare servant card while hunting, summons a strong, lowly Valkyrie warrior, and boom. He goes from nobody to someone that might actually pass the first level. Sure, Kaito still has the personality of a soggy piece of bread, but at least now he's got some muscle behind him. Our story kicks off with our main man, Kaito Takagi, a dude stuck at the bottom rung of the Dungeon Explorer ladder. He's been grinding for 2 years, fighting the weakest monsters, mostly slimes, the typical RPG starter enemy. He goes off killing them with standard insecticides, held like a gun, and continues until he manages to rack up 999 kills. Kaito's going about his usual dungeon business, killing slimes like it's just another day at the office. Then he stumbles across something unusual, a rare golden slime that could become his 1000th kill. He exclaims that golden slimes are not the kind of thing that can just be seen. After some serious struggle because he is so pathetically weak, Kaito finally manages to defeat the golden slime from the golden slime and picks up a rare item, an ultra-valuable servant card. He's in shock because this isn't your average dungeon drop. This card can summon a mythical being. At first, Kaito seriously considers selling it for a ton of cash, which would be life-changing for someone like him. But the temptation to try it out proves too strong, and our boy decides to stall. Having collected the card, he decides to call it a day and heads out to the checkout. There, he meets a generic blonde receptionist who he talks to about how much a special card like the one he found would cost. She tells him that it would cost about 1 billion yen, which causes our little broke adventurer to stutter in shock. He goes to the locker room and keeps the card before walking back home. He meets up with Alp's generic friends who discuss how they themselves pathetically failed to take out some low-level goblins. On the train back home, they ask him why he perseveres with his goblin-killing lifestyle, and he just smiles, saying he has a reason. Back at home, he meets up with his parents at dinner, and then goes to get a shower. Throughout the entire day, he keeps thinking about the 1 billion yen that could buy him a house, and all the games he'd ever want. The next day, as he is walking to school, he runs into his wannabe Lomel, who greets him and walks with him to school. She asks him where he has been all this time, and instead of telling her the truth, he lies shamelessly through his teeth and says he's been hanging out with his friends. Probably thinking that she would be worried about him if she found out that he had been dungeon raiding. She shows skepticism, and then they run into the said friends. He quickly takes them into a huddle so they can join in on the lie, but under scrutiny from Katsuragi, they don't lie properly, and she guesses that he has been dungeon raiding. She just smiles at him and urges them all to get to class. At class, he is unable to concentrate, as he has been thinking about his attained wealth constantly. He decides to ask his pals about what they would do if they found a rare mythical card, and they both say that they would sell it for the money. He thinks about this, and later, after school, he goes to the dungeon and makes sure to avoid the cameras so nobody will see him. He funds a place where he can't be monitored. So what does he do next? You guessed it, he activates the card and out pops a powerful Valkyrie. She's a full-on warrior maiden, complete with armor and some seriously enlarged melons. Kaito's initial reaction is one of awe because, let's be real, this is the kind of game changer he's been waiting for. The Valkyrie, it seems, is going to be his ticket out of the first floor grind. Unfortunately, the divine-looking servant disappears, and he is left wide-eyed like a lost fool. He glances around and can't fund the Valkyrie anymore until he spots a tiny look, lowly staring at him with baby eyes. Seeing that he had put all his hopes on a literal child, he goes on his knees and brutally curses the day he was born. The lowly servant asks him if he's okay, and he shrugged off his pain at losing out on his mega funds. The servant informs him that there is a slime nearby, showing that she can detect close-by enemies. She leads the way, and when they see the slime, he asks her to destroy it. Instead of using a standard method of attack, she goes ahead and summons lightning, showing Kaito that she is indeed more powerful than a weakling like him. Immediately after, she informs him that she is hungry, and he feeds her some magic cores. He realizes that the more energy she uses, the hungrier she gets, and he can't afford to give her all his magic cores. He decides to use her as a slime locator instead, and proceeds to kill a record number of slimes, earning him the title of Slime Slayer. He goes back to the the blonde receptionist, and she is surprised that a low-level weakling like him is capable of such a haul. Later, he remembers when he was a child with Katsuragi, and they watched her father be a cool adventurer. We now see him with a new shield and wooden stick, along with his servant, at the entrance of the second floor. 15 years ago, an advertisement showing the state of things aired on TV. Strange dungeons appear, and in a move to discover the secrets of the dungeon exploration squad is formed. It consists of several members of society, like firefighters and martial artists, Tsukune. The advertisement shows how the dungeons work, and how adventurers can buy potions to heal themselves. Meanwhile, Kaito continues his fighting in the dungeon and carries his magic core collecting business. Sylphie senses a goblin nearby, and they find it sleeping behind a bend. Cowardly Kaito is petrified to his bones, but at the same time, he doesn't want to make Sylphie do all the work. He grips his wooden staff and prepares to face off the goblin, but his legs begin to shake pathetically. He tells her that even if things get dangerous, she should use her divine lighting skill. Kaito charges at the goblin with his staff, but it easily dodges him and steps to the side. The goblin counters, but Kaito is able to block it with his shield and struggle to keep it at bay. He pushes it away successfully, and Sylphie cheers for him. He rushes in for the unaliving blow, but he trips tragically on a stone, but still manages to defeat it. As he does, his level changes. They proceed to run around the dungeon and vanquish multiple goblins. When he is done, he goes back to the blonde secretary and deposits his loot. Once again, she is surprised that he has leveled up and even gotten a lot of loot from his raid. He goes on adventuring in the dungeons, and soon he is too tired to be in class or even focus on other things. One day, he and Katsuragi are walking together and he starts limping like a penguin. She asks him what is wrong, and he lies again, not wanting to tell her he has been going to the dungeon. They proceed for another raid, and he tells Sylphie that he wants to fight off some goblins alone, or else he won't be able to level up. Unfortunately for him, he tries it and ends up in bandages and has to purchase a healing potion from the blonde lady who tells him to take it easy. Eventually, he goes back to farming slimes so he can accumulate more money for better equipment and gear, and also magic cores to feed his ever-loving and ever-hungry Loli. He goes back to square one and starts pinching off slimes and is able to upgrade his weakly old wooden staff and get a metallic one, which is stronger. As they discuss in the dungeon, she notices a strange presence, and they immediately go to investigate. They spot a silver slime and instantly attack it, taking it out together as a team. As the slime disintegrates, he sees that it dropped another special card, similar to the one he found before. This discovery makes Sylphie concerned, but Kaito goes ahead and summons the servant anyway. To his surprise, another Loli appears before him. The new servant introduces herself as Viscount Lucera, and she immediately starts talking as if she owns the place. She roasts Kaito about how he is a weak and dumb master. Syl sheepishly tells her that she shouldn't talk to their master like that. Lucera doesn't listen, and goes on to ask for food even though she hasn't done anything yet. Kaito doesn't budge, and tells her she was to do something first. Just then, Syl senses a slime close by, which prompts them all to follow her. As they reach the slime, Lucera goes into action and blasts the slime into ash, shocking Kaito and Syl. She urges him to hurry up and feed her the magic core that the slime left behind. They find another monster, a goblin this time, and Lucera uses a different type of skill to destroy it. This skill shocks Kaito even more, because of how it turns the victims into disgusting slobs. Lucera is fed the magic core and realizes that it tastes better because the enemy was stronger. She demands that they go further into the dungeon so that she can fight better monsters. Kaito stops her and explains that going deeper will mean they have to face off monsters in groups. She replies and shows that she doesn't care, which makes Kaito ask her if she knows anything about the dungeon, which she says she obviously doesn't. She insists they go deeper, and Kaito finally gives in, but says they should rest since she's probably tired. She refuses, saying she's fine, but Syl interrupts and explains that Kaito is only trying to be considerate. The next day, they go deeper into the dungeon and immediately run into two hellish-looking hounds. Kaito acquired a crossbow, which Syl says suits him. He emphasizes that it was expensive to get, and Lucera adds that just because it was expensive doesn't mean it better. They stop the chatter, and Kaito shoots at the hounds, but he misses pathetically. The hounds charge at him, and he calls for Syl, who puts up a shield against them. Lucera then steps up to burn the hounds. Kaito feeds her one of the two magic cores, and she complains that she wants more. He explains to her that if he gives her everything, there won't be any left. She complains, but relents as they face off against Pumbaa from Lion King next. The monster charges at them, and Lucera blasts it with flames, but it doesn't stop it. Kaito steps up to blow and shoots it straight in the eye, which causes the monster to shout in pain, scaring the pitiful Kaito so much that he falls on his back in fear. Syl is about to intervene as the monster charges toward Kaito, but he manages to shoot it again on the head, which finally brings it down. Syl praises him for his success, but Lucera taunts him about how his knees gave out from being such a half-wit mama's boy. Kaito leaves the dungeon, and as he is on the escalator leaving, he overhears some girls talking about how they made it to the 6th floor in their party. Kaito sits in class and smiles to himself like a demented patient about how he and his lowly girls will get there too. His friends call his attention to their discussion. They ask him about which school he plans to apply for, but he is clueless as he hadn't thought about it at all. Just then, Katsuragi walks in on them and asks if they're discussing their first choice schools. They tell her they are, and she asks Kaito which school he wants to go to. Since he doesn't have a clue yet, he redirects the question to her, and she tells him she wants to go to Uka Academy. Kaito then lies that he wants to go there too, which gives her immense joy, as she believes they could be together still after going to the same kindergarten and school. The teacher calls her to help her hand out some papers, and she waves them goodbye. Later in the dungeon, Syl and Lucera are battling constantly and taking out different kinds of monsters. Kaito keeps feeding Lucera double portions of magic cores, which makes Syl sad, but the fool can't seem to know why she's not happy. It's only after he goes home and sees a program on TV that shows jealousy that he realizes that Syl might be upset that he's giving Lucera more magic cores than her, especially since she's new. He goes on to imagine a situation where Lucera and Syl have a duel to settle their dispute, and he is scared that it might lead to the end. Kaito stands in traffic with Katsuragi, and she asks him what is bothering him. He decides to explain the problem to her, but stylishly says that it's a conflict between his friends and two girls they met. Katsuragi advises him to just be direct and ask the girl instead of guessing. He decides to take her advice. He later goes to the dungeons and summons only Syl. He asks her what she thinks about Lucera, and Syl, being the goody two-shoes she is, and says that she loves her. Kaito presses on and insists that if she has a problem, she can tell him. Syl eventually gives in and says that she doesn't like how he's been giving Lucera special treatment over her. Kaito denies this, but he is insistent, and even says that he has been giving her more magic cores. Kaito understands that she was jealous, and then decides to give them equal treatment. During their next raid, while they take out monsters, he starts feeding them more and more magic cores to adapt to his statement. Syl levels up and gets new attacks, but this also causes her appetite to increase. The next time he goes to see the blonde receptionist, she mentions that he's been bringing fewer magic cores than usual. He decides from then on to start doing some of the fighting himself, so he can keep the magic cores. Once he starts getting things done on his own, he accumulates enough and believes he can get one of the fancy suits on sale. Another day, when they are in the dungeons, they find another special slime, and he informs Lucera and Syl that they need to defeat it at all costs. As they do, he discovers an item that gives him mage water abilities. This gets him all excited, and he goes to test it immediately against a monster, but it's so weak that he lands back on his sorry behind and is saved by his servant. Sad on the swing at night and considering his pathetic nature, Katsuragi comes to him and asks what is wrong, but he doesn't tell her the real reason. Together, they walk home, and he thanks her for the advice she gave about the girl issue. She tries to confirm that it was actually about him, but he denies it. She waves it off and bids him goodnight. As she enters her place, she pouts in annoyance because he talked to another girl. Meanwhile, Kaito walks home wondering why she abruptly left, and wonders if she's jealous like Syl, but he waves it off and says it's not possible. Kaito keeps practicing the water spell and gets a little better, but it makes him exhausted each time he uses it. Fortunately for him, he has two little lowly cheerleaders supporting him all the way. He goes home and flops like a bag to his bed before dozing off. He has a flashback about Katsuragi's dad and renews his determination to be strong. The next morning, he goes at it again and gets a little better, but the effort still drains him. He decides to practice his control and learns to make shapes. He first makes a cube successfully, but with great effort. But when he tries to make the magic core shape, it becomes too hard and he collapses, leaving his cheerleaders wailing that their master has passed away. He leaves and runs into three waifus at the entrance who ask him if he's okay. He apologizes, and after he walks off, they talk about hard work and how he looked so worn out. One of the waifus says she'll have to work hard too. During class, Kaito dozes off completely and is approached by a teacher. He wakes up abruptly and shouts out that he'll continue training. This causes everyone to laugh at him. Later, he talks to his friends about how he's training hard with the water skill. Just then, Katsuragi walks in on them like a properly trained assassin and asks what he's training for. He lies through his teeth and says that he's learning how to dance. She congratulates him and asks him to dance with her sometime before she walks away. Back to training, he uses his water spell on a goblin, and it manages to unalive it. They celebrate and decide to move to another level. Equipped with the suit he finally bought, which he explains will keep him out of danger, they move on and quickly find some cockroach-looking monsters. Lysira and Syl freak out and immediately start spamming attacks at the monster because they scare them. Kaito runs to meet them and discovers that all the monsters have been dealt with. He offers them the dropped cores from the monsters, but they don't like it so much. They proceed and see mud monsters, which they dispatch quickly. Later on, Syl discovers mana coming from a blank wall, and she blows it open with her lightning skill. There they find a secret dungeon and 2 monsters. The first monster doesn't take any damage from the magical attacks from both his servants, and he is forced to use his bolts. They harm the monster and reduce its health, but he quickly runs out of ammo because he was being too stingy and poverty-ridden to buy more. He ends up having to use his new skill paired with the item he got from the suit to make ice crystals that finally end the monster. The second monster gives Lysira some trouble, and they quickly move to help her. Syl uses her lightning attack to destroy it significantly, while Kaito blocks it with a shield. The monster, however, refuses to go quickly, so he goes back to his old ways and uses his standard big spray, which ends up working and defeating the massive slime. As they check for drops, they find a red magic core and a sword that looks pretty much like what Barbie uses at breakfast. He takes the spoils to the blonde lady, who asks questions about where he found the red gem. He points out the place on the map, and she says she'll have to investigate. He asks about the gem, and she tells him that it'll fetch a good price. She also suggests that he join an upcoming event. Back at school, he tells his friend about the event, and again Katsuragi interrupts and asks what he's talking about. Like he has been doing constantly, he lies to her and makes up some lame excuse. Later at the event, he meets 3 waifu he ran into earlier, and discovers they are in the same party. Thanks for joining us on another adventure, my fellow weebs. If you enjoyed this episode of Weebtoons, make sure to smash that like button and leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel.